It is 6:30, so anybody that joins us later can come in. Hello, welcome. My name is Sarah Brandt. I am with Brandt Honey Producers. We co-own it. I am going to point her out. My mother-in-law is right there as well. It is a family business, so we'll start there. It started out with her husband's father. So my husband's grandfather started at Eldon Brandt back. He is from Kansas. Came up here, thought he was going to be a farmer. Not so great of a farmer. They have a big honey packer down there that bottles honey and stuff like that. That's how he kind of started in the world of honeys and bees and things like that. And so he came to South Dakota, started his swing at beekeeping. And then my father-in-law, Merle Brandt, has been running it for the past, my husband was talking about it, 45 years he's been working in that. And so my husband started when he was young in the business. He helped out as a high schooler, dabbling in it, and then decided, hey, that's what I want to do too. I want to continue it. So we're in the thick of it with my husband and I and my in-laws. We're all working together still to keep our business running, and we're happily doing that. So I'm going to talk just general bees, beekeeping, honey, what goes into the honey making process, and all of that. I am going to give a warning because I asked the library about it as well. We do have live bees. This is a sealed case. However, if you are deathly allergic to bees, please take care of yourself. Have your own EpiPen or watch the Zoom recording after, attend virtually. So I do have some live bees that you'll be able to come up and look at. They're really cool. That's like the heart of this whole thing is the bees, right? So I wanted to make sure they were here, that they were present, that you guys got to see them. We do have some of the different kinds of bees in there. So I'll hopefully be able to show some of you some of them. So we'll talk about all of that. And then at the end as well, I brought honey. My husband said, why are we bringing our own honey bear? This is the bear that we still use at our home. We don't sell it at these jars anymore. These are like the old traditional, but we can try it. I have some spoons here, so you grab your individual spoon and you can try a little bit of honey if you'd like. We also do have some for sale at the end if you're interested. And we'll talk about where else you can find Brandt's honey locally in our community. So I'm going to start out with bees. So the colony, I want to talk about who is in the colony and what makes up the colony. So when you look out into a pasture and you see stacks of bees boxes out there, you might see like 4 or 5 high or less. So talking with my husband and confirming all the details, usually the 2 bottom boxes are where they're laying their eggs and breeding their next bees. The other boxes on top typically are used for honey storage. And so when you look out into a pasture or something and you see a stack, one stack is 1 colony of bees. So within that 1 colony, there's about 4,000, 5,000 bees, depending on the health of the colony. It could vary, could fluctuate. 1 queen bee for that 1,000, for that stack, 1 queen bee. The rest of them are in there. So the other types of bees that are in there, though, and I will talk about that. Here, let me get my photos up here for you guys.
So do they think they're still protecting the queen bee right now?
So my husband did say he left the queen with the colony.
Right.
She's not
but
in
did
there.
They know that?
He said they're lost. They're kind of just scattered. Yeah. They don't really know where they're going. Right now, they're like, what's going on? Where's our queen? So yes, they do attract themselves to the queen, but we'll talk about that here in a minute. So there's 3 types of bees. So there's 3 types of bees. There's the worker bee, there's the drone bee, and there's the queen bee. So in that stack, we said 1 queen bee, and she is identifiable. She has typically a longer body. You'll see her moving around, okay? The queen bee, when she is born, she will fly out of her cell and go and mate with the drone bees, the male bees, up in the air once on her first flight, and she will come back to the colony and she will stay in the colony and lay eggs for the rest of her life. Lifespan of a queen depends on health of the colony. About a year, could be more, could be less, but she can live about that long, and her job is just to lay. And so all of the worker bees, what they do is they come around and they feed her and they take care of her while she goes around laying eggs. So the other 2 types of bees that I barely and briefly mentioned, here's another picture of the queen. You can see she almost has like a shiny spot when you're looking, but the biggest thing is the long abdomen with the eggs. That's the biggest identifier. The little paint spot you saw on there is a beekeeping thing. Some beekeepers use it. It's just to find your queen. And I'll talk about how we get the queens in there and get them working. So we have our queen bee. We have worker bees. Now, question, do you think worker bees are male or female? Smart, yes, they are female. All of the worker bees are female. So that is the mass majority of bees, the population in the colony. Worker bees, all female. So their jobs vary from thing to thing, right? So they need to build up the comb with wax to either put eggs or honey or pollen in them. They are the ones that are out flying, collecting nectar and pollen. They are the ones in the hives making honey and putting it in there and capping it off. The male bee, I said it once, but maybe you didn't hear me, is a drone bee. He's a little bit fatter. He has bigger eyeballs. There are a couple in there, and I made sure with my husband that I could identify the drone bees, so hopefully I can find them again and point them out to you when we're looking at that later. They have bigger eyeballs and a bigger bum. They don't do anything in the hive. I'm sorry, I had to get it out there. So there's not very many of them. Yes, there's not very many of them within the colony because the majority of their purpose is not within the colony. Their purpose is to fly out and to fertilize a queen that's up in the air. That is their only job. And after the insemination of a queen, they die. So that is the purpose of a drone bee, and there are a few in the colony that we'll see. Hopefully I'll be able to identify them for you, but that is their role. And so those are the three types of bees, their roles within the colony, the male, the female, and the queen. Something that I always find interesting, so within here, and I do have a couple frames that don't have bees on them, but we can look at them, and there are some in here as well. My husband pulled a frame of brood. Brood means that there's eggs and larvae in it. So if we look closely, and hopefully we'll be able to see it as well, you can see some eggs and you can see some larvae. A lot of the larvae at a certain stage, they will cap them off to protect them, to let them finish growing, but some of them are uncapped yet. So you can see this little swirl of a larva at the bottom of the cells in here. So the queen goes around and she lays this little tiny, smaller than a rice grain egg at the bottom of the cell. And so that egg is being taken care of by the worker bees that are tending to those eggs. It's feeding it, nourishing it, capping it off until it grows to be a bee, and then it can come out. So this is an adult version, so sorry kids if this gets boring, but scientifically for bees, whether it becomes a male or a female is very interesting. So the queen will lay an egg, and the egg will either be fertilized or unfertilized. A fertilized egg will become a female bee. An unfertilized egg will become a male bee. I was in AP Bio here in Yankton in high school back then, and that doesn't make sense to me, but that's how it works for bees. If it's unfertilized, it will become a male. If it's fertilized, it will become a female. So with that, though, how does a bee become a queen bee? And when does a hive start to make a queen bee? So they will either have indications that the queen is struggling or that the queen is gone, and they will start to feed that cell a special nutrient other than their nectar and their pollen, and they will feed it royal jelly. Because they give it this specialized nutrition, it starts to develop into a queen bee instead of just a regular worker bee. And so you will see a queen cell is built up because she's bigger. She has a bigger bottom that needs to have space and she needs to grow in there. So sometimes you will see a queen cell. The way beekeepers do it is a little bit different than what they do naturally, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, so bees will, if they lose their queen or if they see that she's struggling, they will try and build their own queen. There can only be one queen per colony, and if there are multiple, what do you think? Yep, yep. They fight it off and they figure out which one is going to be there. And then the hive like you mentioned at the beginning, they will attract themselves to that queen bee and they go with her. So if you've ever seen videos of people that have bees on them and they're just taking pictures or whatever, they usually find the queen, put the queen on them, then the bees just stay on them as well because they just want to be close to the queen. So there is that about the queen. Let's see. Where was I after this? I have pregnancy brain, so I have my notes here. Okay, so I wanted to talk about, so I talked about work in the colony. So yeah, so bees will go around, they will gather nectar, gather pollen, raise the bees, cap it off, take care, put stuff in their colony. They're putting some pollen patties within their cells. Sometimes they put honey in their cells or eggs in their cells, and then that's what they take care of and tend to. So as for the honey making process for a bee, so they go to a flower and they gather nectar, sweet liquid from a flower, right? They keep it in their stomach and it is swished around, as I'm going to let you taste this later. It is swished around and mixed with their secretions. The water is diluted down and they spit it up back into a cell. It's literally the secretions within their digestive system that makes it change from nectar into honey. So that is about the honey making process for a bee. And then I wanted to talk to you about the beekeeping process for beekeepers. So, and notice my shirt does not say I am a beekeeper, it says I love a beekeeper. I needed to make sure to clarify that I am not the one out there working, it is my husband, it is my father-in-law, it is our workers that are out there doing the keeping. We are just the help, we are the aides, we are the helpers. So a beekeeper. So with beekeeping, you will see boxes. Let's start there. This is the home that we provide for bees. Within the boxes, there are wood slats called frames. Okay, and I'll show you guys a couple different ones of these. So I'm actually going to open the other one because the other one has unbee touched frames in here. So they'll put them up in a stack. There's no lids in between. When you see a stack out there, it's open. I don't know if you can see that. So the bees can go up and down when you see that stack. The lid only goes on top of that. So we put in frames. These are man-made, wood and plastic. This provides a base for them to start building their comb. And they can use this comb for whatever they need to, whether it's eggs or honey or pollen. And so he gave me a couple that the bees started to build on. So comparing it, you can kind of see that it's built up a little bit more than others. Okay? And that is the bees building up the wax in the same shape. And so this is capped honey. He said not for consumption, but this is capped honey. They have put wax over the top of the cell. Once they have building it up, this is not very thick. It's very thin. It's not built up. They can't store anything in it. So what they do is they build it up so it has more of a cylinder to be able to put stuff within it. And so this one does have honey in it. We were also talking about the color that you see within the comb. He says that the darker comb is typically comb that they have laid eggs in, and the lighter comb is usually honey. And the more they use it for brood, for the eggs, the darker it will get over time. And so we will see that in some of these. It does get really dark. Well, these do have some larvae in it. So I'll pull these out if anybody's curious and wants to see them as well. And there's some pollen patties in there. So we have these frames. There's usually about 10 frames. Now, we don't pull the honey until the end of the summer. So I'm going to talk about this as part of the box, and we'll talk about the honey process and the seeds in here in a minute. So besides the frames within a box, you may also see this that goes in there. This is the feeder. So when we take the honey from them, we do supply them with something else to feed themselves, corn syrup. So a thick, dense, nutrient, sugar providing food for them. We fill these up with corn syrup, and that's what they can supplement themselves off of. You don't take all of the honey from them, you don't strip them completely dry, but you do want to make sure they do have enough nutrients over time to be able to feed themselves. So we fill this up with huge tanker full of syrup, and we fill these up for them, so that is their food. Okay, so boxes. The bottom two boxes are typically brood or where they have their eggs. So that's where the season starts. There's one queen and they're building up their colony. And so I'm going to start out, the season is cyclical over the year, right? I'm going to start out where we're at right now. We're just finishing up in Texas. And this is why I had her pull up a map. I know Texas is hidden, but you know it's there. In eastern Texas, we just are bringing all the bees, shipping them up on semi-trailers up to South Dakota. What they were doing in Texas is they were rejuvenating. We just finally started getting flowers and nice weather here in Yankton, a week ago? A week or two ago. So in Texas, there's a lot more flora and fauna going on right there right now. So they're able to feed themselves, they're able to go visit, to get pollen, to get nectar. That is where we kind of build up the hive, and that's kind of like restarting ground of the year. So within that, we purchase queen bees, which is an interesting concept. So there's two kind of ways to purchase queen bees. So there are beekeepers out there that only raise queen bees, and that's the only part of beekeeping that they do. When we buy, so you can buy the full-on, already hatched, already had taken her flight, fertilized queen bee in a box like this. She comes in the mail. She's about $26. One bug. And so they're overnighted mailed. They have vents and screens. They typically come with a couple worker bees that are kind of tending to her and checking on her. And that queen bee, when my husband and his father-in-law, when they go out, they look at a colony and they'll see that the queen is struggling or something like that, they'll take out the old queen. They call her the old lady. A very endearing term. They call her the old lady. They'll take her out and they'll put in the new queen bee in the box. The box is capped with a little like waxy type substance. It allows the colony to smell her, to get used to her, and then eventually they will eat that cap, and then she will establish herself within the hive. And then she'll start laying, and she is fertilized, but again, it's kind of like up to chance. You hope that she's fertilized, you hope that she does well, and you hope that they arrive on time, and so that way she's not dead already in the box or things like that. So it's kind of a tricky process, but we've had good collaboration with our queen cells. This year, however, the weather does play in part to whether the queens are ready or not, or we need them. So this year, the weather kind of threw us for a loop and the queens weren't ready, but our hives needed new queens. And so we were down there, we were trying to figure something out. So the other way that queen breeders sell them, so instead of already fertilized, already hatched, ready to go, some sell the queen cell itself. So she's still sealed in here. She's not fertilized. She hasn't taken her flight yet. She's still closed up. And so they'll sell this to you. And so what you do is you take the cell, you put it in the hive. She hatches out of there. She'll take her flight and she should come back. And it's just a different way of doing it. Some people, and this is cheaper. It's like $6 a cell. But you have to also, it's very timely because when she's starting to hatch is when she needs to be in the hive and ready to go. So it's, I don't know how the timing works. I'm like, how did they know? How did they know she was ready? She didn't have a timer on her, but they have that a lot more figured out than we do. And so we had to try that this year. And so we'll see how that impacts colony growth and success and stuff like that. So rejuvenating, getting a new queen, making sure the queen is doing well. When I talked earlier about eggs being fertilized or not, what is a bad queen? A queen that's not laying as many eggs, or they can tell if she starts laying only drone eggs. So if she starts laying only unfertilized eggs, she's kind of out of her fertilized eggs and they need a new queen, they need something. Or if her laying pattern, she has only a few eggs here and a few eggs here and it doesn't look healthy, that's when they'll try and switch that queen. So they're down there and they are getting the new queens in, getting the colonies built back up. They will split colonies as well. So what they'll do is they'll have a colony full of bees ready to go, a lot of frames like this. They'll take a couple frames of bees, put them in one, couple frames of bees, put them in the other, make sure they each have a queen. Now you have 2 colonies instead of the 1. So they'll split colonies as well. But right now, like I said, we're just finishing up getting the rest of our colonies, all of our boxes back to South Dakota via semi-trailers. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen them driving down the highway. Load them in the morning when the bees are still in their hives, or at nighttime when they've come back to their hives, is when you're supposed to load or unload the bees into the semi-trucks. But when they're driving down the road, so windy that they don't fly out. But you may find bees at truck stops when they have to stop and fuel, but we try and have our truckers make it quick. Or at stoplights, sometimes you'll see motorcyclists at this time of year, you know. So we do transport them via trucks right now. So that season is we're ending our little time in Texas that lasts about a month or two. And then South Dakota is the honey making time during the summer. So they're all landing right now in South Dakota, getting them out into our bee yards. So bee yards, it's a deal with somebody who has a piece of land that would like to have bees. We register it with the state of South Dakota. We pay a fee to register it, and we are allowed to have about 40 colonies on each bee yard, and they have to be within at least 3 miles of each other or more. Whether it's your own bee yards or other bee yards, you have to have that distance because there needs to be enough flowers and stuff for the bees to visit within that space. And so South Dakota, they're going to be here. Brandt Honey Producers, we have our bees in a 50-mile radius of Yankton. And then we also do have a pool in the northern part of South Dakota, by Britton, South Dakota. Mainly because if weather doesn't go well here, maybe it went well in Britton, so you always have a chance of, if something goes wrong, you have you don't put all your eggs in one basket kind of thing. So we do have, but it's all around South Dakota, so all of our honey is local, the majority is around Yankton. Let's see. Honey making process, so they're going to put all the bees out in their bee yards. They're going to feed them, make sure they have enough stuff to start off with the corn syrup. They're going to be checking them. There are some things that are ailing the bee colonies that are making the bee colonies struggle, that we'll talk about here in 1 minute. So they'll do some treatments to help them with that. And they're just checking on them. And then we will extract the honey towards the end of the summer, starting in August and September. We have a big extracting machine. So what they do when they're out there, when it is pulling season, they will have their bee suits on because bees do get angry. They don't wear them all the time. But when you are out there moving the bees, pulling the frames out, they're getting agitated. Yes, they will sting you. So they wear these. These are the bee suits that we wear. I don't know if those of you who thought of beekeeping, you think of the hat and the veil. That's a little bit older traditional style. You see this more spaceman looking suit more often. It keeps the bees away from your face a little bit better. It's a little bit sealed up better with the tight zippers and things. The guys typically wear big leather boots, and then the gloves that they wear are leather as well. Sometimes they tape their fingers because stingers do come through the tips of bees. Their other handy dandy tool that they always need is their hive tool. These boxes, they have frames that are not used, so there's not a lot of wax and honey sealing it, but a lot of times it's stuck with wax and they have to pry it open. And so the hive tool is pretty easy to do that. And then also getting frames out, they have to use it to pry them out of there to get the wax as well. So this is the handy dandy hive tool. Their suit, their gloves. This is to calm the bees. And so this is a smoker. And inside the smoker, we use burlap to burn. It just has different beekeepers use different things. My husband was talking about some beekeepers use pine needles. Otherwise, there's specific smoker pellets that you can buy. We use burlap, and it just burns well for us. It works well for us. It helps calm them down. I was asking about how do you pull just the hive, just the boxes off and not pull all the bees off for when you want to extract the honey. So there's something called Beego, very stinky. It is like on a strip and they lay it on top and it makes the bees go away. Beego, smart name. And it makes them go down to the bottom boxes where their eggs are. And so all they do is they pull off the top 2 boxes, that is their honey production. And over the summer, my husband and his workers are watching to see, are they filling those boxes up? If they're filling those boxes up, they'll put another box on, super it. And that's where the honey will be up in the top boxes. So when they pulled it off with the Beego, they took off just the top boxes. They left the queen, they left the bees, they left the eggs in the bottom 2 boxes. We just pulled off the top boxes with honey, put them on the truck, take them to our shop. Everybody always asks, where do you put your bees? Well, they're all still in the bee yards, but at the shop, we have our trucks, we have our equipment, we have our extractor machine, we store our honey there. So our extractor machine, they will lift a big box up. There's no bottom, so we have something that pushes all the frames up on a conveyor belt, and the frames will go on the conveyor belt. There's a knife that slices off the wax cap because they cover it so it's sealed. So it slices off the wax cap and it goes into this big circle drum. And in that circle drum, we shut it once it's full and it starts to spin. So with centripetal motion, it pulls the honey out to the outside of the barrel, and then we store it in our big 500-gallon tank thing that eventually we take out from there. So that is, and then they will be checking on the bees. They'll be feeding the bees with whatever, with corn syrup since we just took honey from them. And then they will kind of sit there and finish their summer there. So that is the honey making time of year. And after they're done honey making, we send them to California. Does anybody know why the bees go to California? Yeah, pollination of almond trees. And so there's other things that can be pollinated in the United States. For our company, for our production, we have collaboration with almond growers. They have to have pollinators in order to produce almonds. So we bring the bees out there. It's cold in South Dakota anyway, already starting September. They go to California, they pollinate the almond trees. There is a period of time where they're not pollinating and they're not in Texas yet. We tried to keep them inside of our shop with the door shut, dark, cool, for them to kind of have a little hibernation stage. Used to try different things. Before we didn't hibernate them, sometimes we hibernate them. We're just trying out different things this year. This last year we did. We'll see how it goes. But it also depends on things like what were the queens like, what were the flowers like, and so you have to always be trying things, and you never know exactly what it is that worked or didn't, so you're always trying things. But yeah, so they go out to California and they pollinate. Again, shipped on semis out there. They go in their orchards. They decide how many colonies per acres of almonds, however long they need to be there, when the blooms are blooming, and when they're not spraying. And then we'll take them out of there and they'll go back to Texas to rejuvenate, and then we kind of start over. So that's for Brandt Honey Producers. That's our cycle. Other beekeepers do cycles as well, but maybe different states, different parts of the state. South Dakota is a big honey making state. Do you guys know what kind of flowers the bees make in South Dakota? Very common. Clover. Clover and alfalfa are the biggest ones. And clover honey is very light in comparison to others. There's a misconception that light honey is bad honey. Not always. In our case, we know that it's made with clover honey, depending on the flower that they're pollinating and taking nectar from, it changes the color. Sunflowers is going to be a darker yellow, but South Dakota is typically clover honey, and it's a little bit sweeter. For my husband and his father-in-law, they say that's cream of the crop. I also brought a jar of other honey, crystallized honey. So over time, honey will crystallize. It does not mean it went bad. Honey can never go bad. All you have to do is heat it up, and it will come back to look exactly like this.
I didn't know that, so I've even thrown honey away.
Yep.
I just learned today that that's what
Yeah. So if you see it doing something like this, it's crystallizing. But there is also whipped honey that we started to sell at Heidi. I didn't bring any of that. Sorry. Whipped honey, you put it in a machine, it just whips it up so it's spreadable. It's not crystallized, but it's still honey as well.
My question was, can you melt that down in the microwave, or
Yes.
should you do it in the kettle?
So you can do either.
Because I heard if you microwave it, damages it.
So there's some truth to that as well. So Brandt Honey Producers, when we process our honey, the only process we do is getting it out of the comb into the jars, right? And so what we do though is we do filter it to make sure that there's no bee parts that are in it, because inevitably a leg or an antenna or something. So you don't want that in your honey. So we filter it out to make sure that that's not in there. And then there is a certain temperature. So with honey, they say it's better to eat local honey because it has local antigens for like pollen and allergies, so it can help in that way. There is a certain temperature at some point where it can kill some of those good anti-antigens that are in here. So there is some truth to that. So maybe, so with the kettle, you can do it slower at a lower temperature to not like zap it and kill them. We only heat it up just enough to make the viscosity easy to pour into bottles. So all of Brandt's honey, no matter what we have, it is all natural raw honey, whether it looks like this or this. Yes, so yeah, so we have it in the glass jars, and it's easier to heat up that way in the kettle, like a kettle with water that you put on a low temperature and you let it sit. Let's see, how can I talk about extracting? Challenges for beekeeping. Challenges for the colonies to stay well. There are a variety of things that are affecting bee populations across the world. Illnesses, there's different illnesses. There you may have heard of colony collapse disorder. They don't know exactly what it is, but all of a sudden a colony will be dead, or a colony will be gone. They will have left, and there's no real explanation or rhyme or reason why. There are a parasite called a mite. I describe it as like a little tick for bees. It looks like a tick. It goes, here, let me see if I have a picture here. I don't think I do, but I will describe what it looks like. So on a bee, you know how big a bee is. It's about that big, and it will attach itself to the bee, and it's a parasite that will feed off of it and kill it, and will be in the brood, will be affecting the larvae, will be affecting the worker bees. So there are treatments that you can do, powders, things like that. And so there are different things you try, and you just do it off season of the honey making process, so none of that gets in your honey. But you do have to treat them to make sure that they are well. Obviously, environment as well for beekeeping. I was discussing it with my husband as well. There are two reasons: spraying of weeds, and so that can be both at a personal level and at a state level. Something that you might not have thought of is like the ditches. Spraying the ditches, that's actually a lot of ground when you add up how many acres of ditches there are. If you go across to Nebraska, they don't spray as much, and there's a lot more flowers growing in the ditches. That's a state decision. So there are some of that, and they don't spot spray here. It's spray it all, which does impact them. They do visit dandelions and things like that, and so spraying is impacting it. The other thing is crop ground that's not used for alfalfa or clover being turned into other things, and then they lose that spot to be able to have other things that are nourishing to them. So those are a couple of the challenges that they're facing. And then I just wanted to talk briefly about when you might see bees and how to interact with them. You guys are here because I think you care either about bees or about honey. So when you see a bee, they typically won't sting you. They do sting, they don't bite. They can only sting one time. If they sting you, they will die. So it's not their top priority to sting you. They are usually very busy. Every time that I've gotten stung, which is only 4 times, and I've been married to my husband for 6 years, we've been together for 10, and I've been at the shop, I've been walking around bee yards, I've been everywhere with bees. They're usually way busy. Every time I've gotten stung, it's my fault. And what I mean by that is I walk into a door handle, I grab the door handle without looking, there's a bee. Of course she stung me because I just squished her. I was helping with extracting, and I grabbed a frame because it fell into something. There's a bee in there. So these are all my fault of me grabbing at things without checking to see if there's a bee on there first. Those are the times that I've gotten stung. You may see a swarm of bees. Yeah. Okay. You may see a swarm of bees like this out on a tree. They're relocating. They got too hot, they got too big in their colony. They're trying to find a different location. They will move. This is not a permanent spot for them. I've walked up to swarms of bees like this to take a video because they're really cool and they're really busy. They don't bat an eye at me. If you start to hear one of the bees start buzzing really loudly in your ear, that's them saying, go away. Just calmly walk away. And they usually will be like, okay, they're gone. And they'll leave you alone. We tell my little 3-year-old son, don't swat at them and just be calm. They do sense if you're starting to get agitated, or especially if you're going like this, they're going to come at you. So we just say no, thank you, bee, and just keep walking. No, thank you, and just keep walking. So they typically won't come after you. People do commonly mistake like yellow jackets for honeybees. Honeybees are furry and they're more golden and smaller. Yellow jackets have no fur and they're bright yellow, bright black. These are more golden color. Yellow jackets are wasps. They will sting multiple times. They're usually in the ground, but honeybees typically won't sting unless provoked or unless agitated. So that's where you might find bees. So I would invite you to come up and look at the bees, to try a sample of the honey on a spoon if you're interested in purchasing the honey. I did want to talk about where we sell our honey in case you're like, I didn't bring any money, didn't know you were going to sell it. We do sell our honey at Hy-Vee. You can find it in the produce aisle or in the honey aisle. And we have our two sizes here, plus we have a larger skep at Hy-Vee that's kind of in the middle of this. We also have our whipped honey for sale at Hy-Vee. Besides Hy-Vee, we sell in Freeman, so if anybody's from Freeman Shopping Center or Jamboree Foods. And then Muddy Mo's just recently, we've been selling them honey for their coffee drinks, but they asked us to bring in some of these small ones to sell as well, so you'll be able to get it there if you frequent Muddy Mo's. Our honey is used in Pizza's Kuchen kitchen. They have pizzas and so in their pizza dough, their starter that they use for their yeast, they use honey as their sugar starter. So we are used in Pizza's Kuchen kitchen pizza. Our wax. So we do have wax that is collected. We don't process it and sell it. There are people who process the wax, but you can find it at the Beeswax Co. She buys her wax from us and she makes very expensive, but very nice candles and other items that you can buy from her as well. And then we sell to large honey packers. And the only reason I didn't put them up there is because they mix our honey with other honey, and then they bottle it and put their own label in it, so it's not specifically just ours. But we sell to a packer in Kansas and a packer in Texas. So, any questions?
Sarah, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Hy-Vee.
Yes.
If you order online and ask for Brandt's honey, that will not happen. You will not find it. And so you have to be specific. You actually have to make an extra note or talk to
If
somebody.
you're doing the online order.
Make sure you put a note that says do not substitute.
Well, no, but they will not get Brandt's honey online without being very specific with
That's
somebody.
good to know.
That you want. Yes, you do have Brandt's honey, and that's what I'm.
Yes, ma'am.
I've experienced
Yeah.
it several times.
Yes, well, that's a good warning for everyone. Thank you. Yes.
Is this picture real?
The pictures here, yes, those are pictures of real bees. And so we'll have them up here for you to look at the pictures, but then look at the real bees too and tell me what you think, okay? Dixie. Daisy, sorry, I just talked to Dixie. Yes, Daisy.
That's okay. Yes, I'm called Dixie often. So you mentioned royal jelly.
Yes.
What about that?
So you may have heard like in beauty products, sometimes they talk about like royal jelly for your skin or things like that. So there are some beekeepers or some other people that process that as a product in and of itself. We don't extract that, but that's something that the bees secrete that they feed to the larvae to make their queens. But we don't go through collecting that and then selling that as a product for our company.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Yeah.
Okay, getting back to the queen bee.
Yes.
So how does she become a queen bee? I mean, there's always worker bees that they're females. How does she become
So
the
it
queen
does
bee?
have to be that fertilized egg. She's a female. It has to be that fertilized egg. So that fertilized egg is in the cell. So instead of it receiving the regular food of nectar, pollen, honey, it receives that royal jelly
And
secretion.
who gives that to her?
The worker bees.
How do they just select that one?
There's some, and sometimes they try a couple. They'll try starting a couple different queen bees, and then one will take and one will come out and be fertilized. Yes, sir.
Why aren't there any king bees?
I don't know. I don't want to get into that question and into that answer. I don't know. All they need is the queen and then her workers in the drone. That's a good question, though. Thank you. Thank you.
How many beehives do you guys have?
Depends on the year, but about 4,000 is so 4,000 stacks. So 4,000
Was
colonies.
that like millions of bees?
Yeah. So if there's 4,000 to 5,000 bees per stack, times 4,000. Depending on the year, depending on the health of the bees, it can fluctuate, but that's the average.
In honey production time, they'll be, the hives will be really large.
Because they'll be in the thick of having flowers, having honey, building, creating, doing well. So it'll kind of fluctuate over the year.
And how long can they live? Like during that migration, how many do you suspect will continue to come back?
So, there's always different colony loss. So, and I'm gonna base it on colony losses, the whole stack,
Yeah.
rather than losses of bees. So the lives of bees depend on how much they're worked, what time of year it is, and the health of the colony. But colonies, some years are really bad at different times of the year. Some years can be really bad where we lose 20%, 30%, you know, and it gets really discouraging, like, why? We've fed them, we've treated them, they've had flowers, what could it possibly be? And so you kind of start, our husbands start going into this, what could it be? What are we doing wrong? What do we need to be doing to help them? Do we need to move them? And so that's the other thing. If you have a registered bee yard, you can politely ask that farmer not to spray. But you can't tell the bees, don't go out of this perimeter, and then the neighbor sprays, and it could be that. And so you never know quite which one it is. Or maybe it's an illness, or maybe it's, if you look, you can find some mites or something. But they kind of have this mystery at the end that they try and solve, to try and tackle.
It was about 3 or 4 years ago, we had better than 60% loss of our
Yeah.
hives.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then another thing that people don't consider, too, is like, well, you have bee insurance? No, there's no such thing as bee insurance. Farmers have crop insurance, you know, if there's a bad year or something. That's not so for bees. There's been some better pushes at the federal level to support beekeepers by giving some supplemental stuff to either have a bee health inspector come out and look at the health of your colonies, and give you some suggestions or tips, or even supplementing with some money, but there's no insurance for bees.
What is like your business at? I mean, that you
Yeah.
extract your honey?
Yeah, so we're located just west of town, on Deer Boulevard. It's like 3 or 4 miles if you head out Highway 50. In that location, like I said, it's our trucks, it's our equipment, it's our extracting machine, it's where we store our honey. But then the bees are out on the bee yards.
It's also our home.
In a home. Yep, it's their local residents. So don't come flying in unannounced, but, yeah. Reach out to Hy-Vee and we can work, you know, if any other needs or communication is needed, or interested in purchasing or selling at a different location or something.
How far did they go in a radius traveling around from the bee
So-
yard?
3 to 4 miles is the radius that they set statewide, and that's about how far they go. And then they come back to their colony, and they do come back to the colony every night. So cold weather, rainy weather, windy weather, nighttime, they're gonna come back to their own colony.
What do these ones think they're doing right now?
I don't know, I think they're mad. Every once in a while you can hear, and it's them being like, put me back in my colony. So we'll have to look, but so this is a brood one, so there's eggs, there's larvae in there. So the ones that are working on the face of the cell, they're checking on and feeding and capping and working on taking care of those larvae. Other questions?
How long do you leave those bees out of the colony then?
Not long. He got them
Otherwise
out
you
at
start
about
making
4
another
o'clock, 4:30. And the other thing with bees, they need more airflow than you would think. So there's vented holes here. There's a screen covering it so they can't come out. But they do need air and oxygen. So even like when we were hibernating them in our building, at nighttime when they weren't flying around, we would open the doors to get oxygen in there because the CO2 levels would start to go up based on how many bees are breathing, which is so weird to think about. But we had to open the doors to make sure they had enough oxygen and airflow. All right, well, I'm gonna set up some frames so you can come look at some of these. Please don't touch or poke in the frames. It is wax, and so if you touch it, and it will smush it. My 3-year-old, I'm thinking in my head. But I'm gonna put some of these out so you can come look at these. Please come look at the hive. It's 2-sided, so people can come on this side or on this side. I'm gonna have my mother-in-law help me with this as well, but if you're interested in trying honey, I have spoons here. Grab a spoon and we'll get you a little bit of honey squeeze on your spoon. If you're interested in buying anything, we'll have that as well over here. 15 for the large and 5 for the small. Otherwise, you can get them at Hy-Vee as well. So come and start looking at things and enjoy it. If you have any future other questions while you're up here, just let me know.